The chess piece moved on a Tuesday. Not the Tuesday anybody was watching. Not the Tuesday Aubrey Drake Graham spent another $300,000 carving his name into a melting block of ice in downtown Toronto. Not the Tuesday the boys' marketing team was begging the internet to please keep talking about the flamethrowers and the pickaxes and the fan in the parka who pulled the release date out of a sculpture like it was the sword in the stone. No. The Tuesday that mattered was June 2nd, 2026, and on that Tuesday, while everybody was still arguing about whether ICEMAN was a comeback or a crime scene, Kendrick Lamar and Dave Free walked into the room with no announcement, no countdown, no episode 1, no 25-foot ice sculpture, and detonated the entire ICEMAN rollout from the inside out with 11 tracks from an artist nobody had heard of 48 hours earlier. And I need you to understand something before we go a single sentence further. What you are about to watch is not me reacting to a beef. What you are about to watch is the prosecution opening the case file on the single most embarrassing strategic collapse of Aubrey Drake Graham's career. A collapse he paid for himself, with his own money, with his own promotional machine, with his own 3-album theatrical rollout, and one that he is somehow still failing to recognize is happening in real time. 3 months. That is how long the ICEMAN rollout took to build. One Tuesday. That is how long it took Kendrick Lamar to vaporize it. And the murder weapon is sitting on Spotify right now under the name Papercut by an artist named Imani Imani. And by the time we get to the contract structure breakdown, and I promise you, the prosecution is getting there, you're going to understand why every single thing the boy has done since May 15th has been a public confession that he already lost a war he is still pretending to fight. Stay locked in, because the gavel is about to come down. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Let me read you the indictment, because the prosecution does not move forward until the courtroom understands exactly what we are looking at. There are 2 stories running parallel right now, and the mainstream hip-hop media, the same media that has been on the boys' payroll since the streaming era began, only wants you to look at one of them. Story 1 is the one with the flamethrowers. May 15th, 2026, Aubrey Drake Graham drops not 1, not 2, but 3 studio albums simultaneously, ICEMAN, Habibti, and Maid of Honour. His 9th, 10th, and 11th studio projects in his catalog, all dropped on the same day, all backed by months of build-up that started in December of 2025, complete with a live-stream documentary series, a literal ice sculpture in downtown Toronto with a release date frozen inside it, fans showing up with pickaxes and flamethrowers, and a lead single called Janice SDFU that according to Billboard debuted at #1 on the Hot 100 and became the first hip-hop song ever to debut with 2 consecutive weeks at #1 on the Billboard Global 200. By any chart metric, by any commercial metric, that is a knockout. 3 albums in the top 3 of the Billboard 200. 463,000 equivalent album units in week 1. Records broken. Streams shattered. The numbers are real. The prosecution acknowledges the numbers. The prosecution will then proceed to demonstrate with evidence that the numbers are the smallest, least important, most easily manufactured detail in this entire story. Story 2, the story we are actually here to litigate, is what happened 2.5 weeks after the ice sculpture melted. June 2nd, a Tuesday. No live stream. No countdown. No 25-foot ice sculpture. No pickaxes. No flamethrowers. Just a single Instagram post from the pgLang account announcing that the label had signed its first female artist, a name nobody recognized, a singer named Imani Imani, born Imani Ram, previously known online as Imani Selena, and that she was dropping her debut album Papercut that same day. 11 tracks. 0 monthly Spotify listeners the day before. 0 marketing budget visible to the public. And within 24 hours, that release became the most discussed R&B debut of the entire summer in the rooms that actually decide what hip-hop history looks like a decade from now. 2 theories of power. 2 completely different scoreboards. And only one of them ages well. The stakes here are not about who sold more albums in June of 2026. The stakes are about which one of these 2 operators is still going to be running the culture in 2031, in 2035, in 2040. One of them is building a noise machine. The other one is building an institution. And the question this video is going to answer, the question I need you to sit with through every single section of this case, is which one of those 2 things actually survives history. Now let us get into the surface evidence, because Exhibit A in the prosecution's case is the rollout itself, and the rollout tells you everything. Aubrey Drake Graham started building the ICEMAN campaign in December of 2025, according to reporting from Billboard and the Euronews Culture Desk. The first move was a coordinate drop on Instagram. Release date inside, he wrote, with GPS coordinates pointing to a downtown Toronto location. Fans showed up. There was a 25-foot ice sculpture. Inside the sculpture, frozen in the ice, was the release date. Now stop. I need you to think about that for a second. The man who already has 2026 biggest streaming numbers. The man who allegedly has 14 #1 singles. The man whose entire commercial infrastructure is the largest in modern rap. That man needed a literal sculpture to convince his own fan base to care about an album drop. He needed flamethrowers. He needed pickaxes. He needed a multi-month theatrical build-up with episodes and a live stream documentary, because at no point in that entire promotional cycle could the music itself carry the conversation. The music was an afterthought to the spectacle. The spectacle was the product. Exhibit B, the song that leaked ahead of the drop. 1 a.m. in Albany. Reportedly contains direct shots at Kendrick Lamar, at LeBron James, at Dr. Dre, at Joe Budden, and at anyone else who did not stand with the boy during the beef that ended his career last year. Now I have to be fair to the prosecution's own standards here. That track has not been confirmed as authentic by Drake or his camp, and credible observers have raised the possibility that the leaked version is AI-generated or a scrapped vault cut. The defense will argue that. The prosecution acknowledges that. But if it is real, if that is what the boy is leading with on an album rollout that took 6 months to build, then the contrast with the response from the other side of the courtroom is so devastating it almost qualifies as cruelty. One side is still rapping about Kendrick Lamar's height. The other side has not mentioned Drake's name in a calendar year. Exhibit C, the streams. Janice SDFU debuts at #1. ICEMAN debuts at #1. 3 albums in the top 3 of the Billboard 200. Numbers, numbers, numbers. And yet, pull up any hip-hop forum that does not specifically exist to defend the boy's brand. Pull up Reddit, pull up Twitter, pull up the comment sections under any music journalism outlet that is not paid to write puff pieces. And the conversation about ICEMAN died inside of 48 hours. The chart numbers are real. The cultural numbers are zero. By the time Imani Imani's surprise album dropped on June 2nd, the entire internet had already moved on from a project that cost millions of dollars and 6 months of life to promote. Exhibit D, the most damning piece of surface evidence in the entire case, is that the very same day Papercut dropped, the search interest for Imani Imani globally outpaced the search interest for ICEMAN within 24 hours, despite the fact that one of those artists had 3 albums and 2 #1 singles in the marketplace, and the other had 11 tracks, 0 monthly listeners, and no marketing budget. That is not a beef. That is a referendum on what the culture actually values. And the culture has ruled. The prosecution rests on the surface evidence. And we are just getting started. And oh, do I have more for you. I have so much more for you that the boys' defense team is going to want to take a recess after the next section. Because what I just laid out, the rollout, the leaked diss, the chart numbers, the search collapse, that was the public-facing evidence. That was the part anybody with an internet connection could verify in 20 minutes. The next section is where the prosecution opens the file the boys' camp has been hoping nobody would open. The receipts that connect the dots between the Chanel show in Paris in early 2024, the timeline of the entire Drake beef, the architecture of 3 pgLang albums sharing the exact same 11-track structure, the names that show up in the production credits across the entire Kendrick Lamar discography, and the question that has been spray-painted onto walls in Los Angeles, Atlanta, and New York that nobody has answered yet. By the time we get to the contract structure breakdown, and the prosecution is getting there, I promised you, you are going to understand that what is happening right now is not a beef and never was. It is a hostile takeover of the entire genre. And to all the Drake fans currently typing, but he just broke Michael Jackson's record in the comments, I see you. I hear you. And the prosecution is about to walk you through exactly why that record is the most expensive consolation prize in modern music history. Stay with me. The receipts are heavy. Layer 2. Cultural evidence. This is the part where the prosecution stops talking about charts and starts talking about the rooms where decisions actually get made. Exhibit E, January 2024. Paris. The Chanel Spring-Summer Haute Couture Show. Kendrick Lamar and Dave Free are credited as creative directors over the presentation. During that show, an unreleased Kendrick Lamar track called I Feel Something debuts, with vocals from an artist credited as Imani. That same show features a track called Snatch. The artist credited on Snatch is Imani. The fashion press picked it up. The music press largely ignored it. Why does that matter? Because that show happened in January of 2024. Before like that. Before Euphoria. Before Meet the Grahams. Before Not Like Us. Before the Pop-Out. Before the Grammy Sweep. Before the Super Bowl. Before any of the cultural events that the public now considers the defining moments of the Kendrick Lamar versus Drake war. Imani Imani was already inside the building. She was already in the sessions. She was already being shaped, developed, prepared. And nobody, not the boy, not his camp, not his media allies, not a single hip-hop journalist on payroll, saw her coming because they were too busy watching the wrong door. The prosecution submits Exhibit E to demonstrate that the signing of Imani Imani was not a reaction to anything. The signing was a plan that had been in motion for at least 2 full years before it became public. Exhibit F. Dave Free's Instagram comment under the Imani announcement post. Direct quote. Reported by multiple outlets, including Stereogum and Hot New Hip Hop. Dave Free wrote, and I am paraphrasing here for clarity, but the language has been screenshotted. A powerful wave of admiration, deep validation for a major accomplishment, steady progress and perseverance through hardship. Steady progress. 2 words. Doing the work of an entire press release. That phrase tells you this artist was not signed last month. That phrase tells you this artist has been in development. That phrase tells you the relationship between Imani Imani and pgLang predates the public announcement by years, not months. Exhibit G. The production credits. Papercut's primary collaborators include producer and writer Don Zinkin, alongside heavyweights James Fauntleroy and Sam Dew. James Fauntleroy, Sam Dew. If those names mean nothing to you, let me translate. Those are the same names that appear in the production credits of Damn. The same names that show up on Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. The same names that built the architecture of GNX. The production network around Imani Imani is not a random R&B production network. It is the exact same production network that has been quietly engineering the most important rap discography of the streaming era. She was not signed from outside the circle. She was already inside the circle. The announcement was just the moment they decided to let everyone else look. Exhibit H, and this is where the cultural evidence gets devastating, is the response from the artists who matter. Within 48 hours of Papercut's release, you had cosigns and reposts and quote tweets from a who's who of the hip-hop and R&B internal community. The kind of cosigns money cannot buy. The kind of cosigns that signal an artist has been quietly respected behind closed doors for a long time before the public was let in. And while that was happening, in the exact same 48-hour window, the public statements from the Drake camp consisted of, I am checking my notes, 0. Nothing. Radio silence from the entire OVO apparatus. Because what is there to say? You spent 6 months building a sculpture. They dropped an album on a Tuesday. There is no clever tweet that fixes that. There is no statement that recovers from that. The room moved on. And the silence from the boys' side of that room is the loudest piece of cultural evidence in this entire case. Now I want to be fair, because the prosecution does not win cases by ignoring counterarguments. The defense will say, and I have already seen this argument in the comments of every video that has touched the story. The defense will say that Imani Imani isn't proven, that one album does not make a career, that Drake's commercial dominance is the only metric that actually matters in 2026. Fine. The prosecution acknowledges the counterargument, and the prosecution dismantles it in 3 sentences. SZA was unproven before Control. Rihanna was unproven before Music of the Sun. Lauryn Hill was unproven before The Miseducation. Every dominant cultural era of the last 30 years has been built around a vocalist that the public had never heard of until the institution behind her decided to introduce her. The pattern is the pattern. And the pattern just repeated itself in front of you. Whether you accept what that means is your problem, not the prosecution's. Now I want everybody to take a breath, because the prosecution is about to make the hard pivot. Everything I have just laid out, the rollout, the leak, the Chanel show, the production credits, the silence, all of that is cultural texture. All of that is the surface and the second layer. None of that is what this case is actually about. This case is about a business. This case is about an infrastructure. This case is about a model of vertical integration that has been quietly engineered over the last 6 years inside a corporate structure that the average hip-hop fan does not even know exists. And that infrastructure is the reason the boy lost a war he is still pretending to fight. So let me take you inside the building. pgLang was incorporated in 2020 by Kendrick Lamar and Dave Free. The public language they used to describe the entity at incorporation was, And I am quoting from documents reported by industry publications, a multilingual at-service company. Not a label. Not a creative agency. A multidisciplinary infrastructure that operates simultaneously in music, in film production, in advertising, in branding. That is not a Wu-Tang Clan structure. That is not a Rockefeller structure. That is not a TD structure. That is a holding company structure. Alongside pgLang, the same two operators run a parallel entity called Project 3 Management, an agency arm that gives them management control on top of creative and label control. So we're talking about two arms of the same business operating simultaneously. One arm handles the artist's creative output and the label distribution. The other arm handles the artist's day-to-day management and career direction. That is vertical integration. That is owning the entire pipeline from the studio to the stage, to the brand deal, to the merchandise, to the publishing, to the touring revenue. That is the model Motown ran in the 60s. That is the model nobody in rap has successfully rebuilt for the streaming era. Until now. And that is the first systemic angle the prosecution wants you to internalize, because it changes the meaning of every other piece of evidence in this case. The first systemic angle is ownership. The boy is signed to Republic, which is owned by Universal, which is one of the three major label conglomerates that have controlled the recorded music industry for 40 years. Every chart number the boy generates feeds a P&L statement in a building he does not own, run by people who report to shareholders he has never met, in a corporate structure that has been very publicly fraying its relationship with him since the Lamar beef went nuclear. That is the corporate context for the entire ICEMAN rollout. He needed those 3 albums to chart, not because he loves the music, although I will give him this much, the man loves making music. He needed them to chart because his leverage inside his own label has been collapsing for 18 straight months, and a commercial win was the only thing that could buy him another negotiating cycle. The second systemic angle is the roster construction. For 4 full years, the pgLang roster was effectively 3 names, Kendrick Lamar, Baby Keem, and Tana Leone, who released Sleepy Soldier jointly with Def Jam back in 2022. That is it. 3 names. For years. No quarterly signing sprees. No flooding the marketplace with 5 rappers and seeing which one sticks. The discipline of that roster is the discipline of a label that is signing artists for 30-year careers, not for 3-quarter streaming pump-and-dump cycles. And then in early 2026, Baby Keem drops Ciudadano through pgLang and Columbia. 11 tracks. Cousin returns after 5 years of relative silence. And then 4 months later, Imani Imani drops Papercut. 11 tracks. Surprise release. And now you have 3 pgLang projects in a single 18-month window. GNX from Kendrick, Ciudadano from Baby Keem, and Papercut from Imani Imani. And when you set the track list side by side and account for the fact that GNX's intro Whacked Out Murals was recorded separately as a rapid response piece to the Drake situation, and that Heart PT6 functions as a series installment rather than a standalone album cut, the spine of GNX is 11 tracks too. 3 albums. 3 identical structural decisions. 1 coordinated creative philosophy across an entire roster. That is not 3 albums. That is 1 statement delivered in 3 movements by 3 artists over a rolling release window as a demonstration of exactly what kind of label these 2 operators are actually running. The third systemic angle is the rivalry context. The same 18 months in which pgLang built and executed this 3-artist coordinated rollout was the exact same 18 months in which the boys' team spent its entire creative and financial bandwidth on 1 theatrical promotional cycle for 3 albums dropped on a single day. 1 operation built infrastructure. The other operation built a sculpture. 1 operation expanded a roster. The other operation doubled down on a single name. 1 operation incubated artists for years before introducing them. The other operation needed flamethrowers. The strategic asymmetry between those 2 approaches is so wide it stops being a competitive comparison and starts being a generational gap. The boy is operating on a 2014 model of label power. Kendrick Lamar and Dave Free are operating on a 2034 model of label power. And the 10 years of difference between those 2 models is the entire reason this case exists. And here comes the truth bomb the entire prosecution has been building toward. Listen carefully, because this is the verdict the gavel is about to come down on. Aubrey Drake Graham did not lose the rap beef. The rap beef ended in May of 2024. That was last summer's verdict, and the prosecution has already filed it. What Aubrey Drake Graham just lost, what ICEMAN actually confirmed in front of the entire industry, is the war for the next decade of who actually controls hip-hop culture. And he did not lose it to a diss track. He did not lose it to a chart. He did not lose it to a Grammy sweep. He lost it to a Tuesday. He lost it to a surprise album by an artist with 0 monthly listeners. He lost it to an infrastructure that has been built in the dark for 6 years while he was busy filming docuseries episodes about himself and freezing release dates inside ICE. The truth bomb is this. The reason ICEMAN had to be 3 albums dropped on a single day is because the boy and his team know that they no longer have the cultural runway to release 1 album at a time the way generational artists do. They know that a single ICEMAN album dropped by itself in May of 2026 would not have generated enough chart noise to keep him in the conversation against what pgLang is building. So they front-loaded. They consolidated 3 projects into 1 weekend to manufacture a chart event large enough to drown out the surprise drops they knew were coming. That is what the 3-album rollout actually was. It was not artistic ambition. It was strategic panic dressed up as ambition. And the proof that it was panic is that 2.5 weeks after that weekend, an artist with 0 monthly listeners dropped 11 tracks on a Tuesday and immediately took over the conversation in every room that matters. The boy can break Michael Jackson's record. The boy can debut 3 albums in the top 3 of the Billboard 200. The boy can break every single week streaming record that exists. None of it changes the underlying reality that on June 2, 2026, the architect of the next decade of hip-hop quietly proved that he can put any artist he wants into the conversation without spending a single dollar on marketing, without releasing a press statement, without making a single public move, just by attaching his label's name to the project. That is institutional gravity. That is what an actual empire looks like. And the moment the boys' team understood what they had just been shown, the moment they understood that 2 years of theatrical promotion can be undone in a single Tuesday, is the moment ICEMAN's commercial victory revealed itself for what it actually is, which is the most expensive losing lottery ticket in modern label history. The producer Soundwave, who built so much of Kendrick Lamar's discography from Section 80 forward, is reportedly now in studios with Taylor Swift. Read that sentence again. The producer-architect of the most decorated rap discography of the last 15 years is now being brought into rooms with the most commercially dominant pop artist of the same era. That is what proximity to pgLang does to a career. That is the gravity at the center of this operation. And Imani Imani has just been pulled into the same gravitational field that has been bending the entire music industry around itself for 6 years. Her first feature placement on a Kendrick Lamar record is not a hypothetical. It is a scheduled event on a calendar nobody else can see. And when that placement drops, her career trajectory will reroute in real time the way Luther Vandross's career rerouted when he stepped into the rooms that built him. The boy has 14 #1 singles. The architect has 1 functioning empire. Only one of those things compounds. Only one of those things ages well. The verdict has already been written. The only thing left is the sentencing. Here is where the prosecution exhales, because the verdict is what the verdict has always been when the work is real and the receipts are clean. The right person is still winning. The architect, Kendrick Lamar, has not released a single note of new solo music since GNX dropped in late 2024. Not 1 bar, not 1 single, not 1 feature verse on a major commercial release. He has been on tour. He has accepted a Grammy. He has played the Super Bowl. He has directed a Chanel presentation in Paris. He has executive produced his cousin's 2nd studio album. He has signed and introduced a debut R&B artist with a fully formed 11-track album. He has built. He has built. He has built. While the loudest voice in the building was begging the internet to please look at his ice sculpture, the architect was quietly assembling the version of pgLang that the next 10 years of hip-hop will have to negotiate with. And every single piece of evidence in this case file, every exhibit the prosecution has submitted, proves the same underlying truth that this channel has been telling you for 2 straight years. The work wins. The work always wins. The artist who treats every job at 100%, every Grammy speech, every Super Bowl performance, every Chanel show, every label signing, every album rollout for an artist who is not even himself. That artist is the one who ends up holding the building when the dust settles. The boy spent his entire 2026 marketing budget on a sculpture. Kendrick Lamar spent his on a singer. Only one of those investments produces a return. The contrast one-liner of this entire case is short enough to fit on a flyer. One man melts ice. The other one freezes the entire culture in place and tells it where to stand. And the satisfying part of this verdict, the part that makes the prosecution's job feel less like work and more like reading scripture, is that nothing about how Kendrick Lamar is operating right now is loud. There is no victory lap. There is no told you so. There is no public gloating. There is just the quiet, relentless, daily work of building something that outlasts the man building it. That is the hero arc. That is the satisfaction. That is the reason this channel has been telling you to stay locked in on pgLang for the last 18 months, even when the public conversation was insisting that the Drake beef was over and there was nothing left to watch. There is so much left to watch. The work is the watch. And the work is winning every single week, whether the algorithm shows you that work or not. The verdict is in. The architect is still building. The boy is still melting. And the courtroom, the actual courtroom of cultural memory, the one where history files its rulings, has already started writing the opinion. The opinion is going to be brutal. The opinion is going to be permanent. And the opinion is going to read in Kendrick Lamar's favor on every single count. This is only the start. I want to be specific about that because vague promises of more chaos are the language of channels that are out of receipts. The prosecution is not out of receipts. The prosecution is just getting warmed up. 2 concrete developments are on the immediate horizon, and you need to be subscribed to this channel to catch both of them in real time. Development 1. The who is the giant question. Those posters that went up across Los Angeles, Atlanta, and New York in the weeks leading up to ICEMAN's release. Anonymous, unbranded, no artist name, no label logo. Just a single black and white question stenciled onto walls in 3 of the most culturally significant music cities in the country. That question has not been answered yet. The internet's working theory connects those posters to a forthcoming Kendrick Lamar project, possibly titled Giant, possibly arriving before the end of 2026. If that theory is correct, then everything you have just watched in this video is the appetizer. The main course is still being plated. Development 2. The next Kendrick Lamar feature placement on a non-pgLang record. There is one coming. The industry whispers have been loud for months. When that placement drops, the prosecution will be in your comments within hours with the full breakdown of why that specific feature on that specific record changes the math on every label conversation happening behind closed doors right now. You do not want to miss either of those. You really do not want to miss either of those. Make sure you are subscribed, make sure your notifications are on, make sure you are dropping a comment below telling the prosecution which piece of evidence, in this case, hit the hardest, because the algorithm is the only thing standing between you and the next breakdown. And if you have made it this far in the video, 21 minutes deep, all the way through every exhibit, every angle, every layer, you are not a casual viewer. You are a member of the jury. You are the reason this work gets to keep happening. Thank you for that. Genuinely. And now, before you click away, one more thing. Want to know what Aubrey Drake Graham actually said about Kendrick Lamar on the deep cuts of ICEMAN that the mainstream press is too scared to break down? Want to know which specific bar reportedly references a private detail nobody outside Drake's camp should have known? Want to know why the response from pgLang has been exactly 0 words, 0 tweets, 0 statements, and one perfectly timed Tuesday album drop? That breakdown is sitting in the suggested video right now. It is exactly as devastating as you think it is. Court is adjourned. The prosecution will see you in the next file.